Where's your house, Eleanor? Oh, that's right. You live in the storage room in the back. My daughter-in-law Jessica dropped that line in front of all the guests, laughing like it was the joke of the year, and my son Michael laughed right along with her. He laughed while I served the dinner I had spent hours preparing. He laughed while his friends looked at me with pity. That's when I set my fork down on the table, looked her directly in the eyes, and said in a calm voice, "Where is your rent money?" Oh, that's right, I'm the owner of this apartment. Until today, the table fell into absolute silence, a silence so thick you could cut it with a knife. Wine glasses hung suspended in the air. The laughter died in their throats. And it was that night when everything changed. When I decided that I would never, ever be invisible again. When I discovered that the power I thought I had lost, in reality, had always been in my hands. But they didn't know that, and that was their biggest mistake. Let me tell you how we got to that moment. How a 68-year-old woman, treated like a burden in her own home, was about to remind them who she really was. It was October 23rd, Michael's 40th birthday. I had started cooking at 5 in the morning. Roast chicken with herbs, golden and crispy potatoes, a fresh salad with that special dressing he had loved since he was a boy. The chocolate cake with cream frosting that took me 3 hours to decorate. My hands ached from kneading, chopping, whisking. But it was my son's birthday, my only son. The boy I had carried on my back while I washed other people's laundry to feed him. The young man who had gone to a good college, thanks to my double shifts, cleaning offices. The man who now lived in the apartment that I bought with the sweat of decades. Jessica had invited 8 of her friends, elegant women, with perfect nails and expensive dresses. They arrived with bottles of wine that cost more than what I spent on food for a month. They settled in the living room as if they owned the place, tossing their bags on the sofa I kept spotless, leaving shoe marks on the carpet I vacuumed every morning. I moved between the kitchen and the dining room for 2 hours, serving plates, filling glasses, clearing dirty silverware. No one looked me in the eye. No one said thank you. To them, I was part of the scenery, like the table or the chairs, a functional element of no real importance. When finally everything was served and there were no more excuses for me to stay standing, I sat in the only available chair. It was at the corner of the table, half hidden behind a huge plant Jessica had bought the week before. From there I could see everything, but no one needed to see me. It was the perfect place for what I had been for the last 3 years. Invisible, I ate my small portion of food in silence. I listened to their conversations about vacations in Cancun, about new restaurants in the trendy part of town, about the Italian shoes Jessica wanted to buy. They talked about spending money, as if money were water, as if they didn't know what it meant to count every penny, as if they'd never had to choose between eating or paying the rent. Michael was beaming. He smiled while Jessica stroked his arm, while his friends congratulated him on his promotion at work, while they toasted his success. My successful son, my handsome son, my son who had forgotten where he came from. Then Jessica got up to get another bottle of wine. She was walking with unsteady steps, laughing too loudly. One of her friends, a woman with brown hair and too much jewelry, asked something about whether I lived there or had just come to visit for the celebration. It was a reasonable question coming from someone who had never seen me before. But Jessica didn't let me answer. She turned to her friends with that smile of hers. That smile I had learned to recognize, the smile that always came before something cruel. "Where's your house, Eleanor?" she asked in a sing-song voice, raising her tone so everyone could hear. She paused dramatically, like an actress on a stage. "Oh, that's right, you live in the storage room in the back." The words floated in the air for a moment. I saw her friends' faces registering the information. I saw their expressions change from curiosity to discomfort. I saw one of them look down at her plate. But Jessica wasn't finished. She laughed. That sharp laugh that made something inside me shrink. "You know," she continued, gesturing with the wine bottle in her hand, "that little room next to the laundry room where we keep the old stuff we don't use anymore." She looked directly at me and added, "But she's comfortable there, right, mother-in-law? She has everything a person your age needs." The air became thick, heavy. I could feel everyone's eyes turning to me, waiting. They wanted to see my reaction. They wanted to see if I would cry, if I would apologize for existing, if I would make myself even smaller than they had already made me. And then Michael laughed. My son, my only reason for living for 40 years. The baby I had shielded with my body when we didn't even have enough to eat. The child I had sung lullabies to on dark nights. The young man I had promised to give a better life than mine. That man laughed at his own mother's humiliation. His laugh was the spark. Jessica's friends started to laugh too. Awkward laughs at first, small and stifled. But they grew when they saw no one was stopping them. They grew until they filled the dining room. They grew until I felt like they were suffocating me. Something inside me broke in that moment. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud. It was silent and final, like a branch that finally gives way under too much weight. I felt that last thread of hope, that last belief that maybe things would get better, snap in two. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't stand up trembling with rage. I set my fork down on the plate gently. The sound of the metal against the porcelain cut through the laughter. I took the cloth napkin, the one I had ironed myself that morning, and slowly wiped my lips. Very slowly. I folded the napkin into a perfect square. And then I looked up. I looked Jessica directly in the eye. I held her gaze until her smile started to falf, until something in her expression changed, until the rest of the table fell completely silent. "Where is your rent money?" I asked. My voice was calm, almost sweet. The kind of voice you use when talking to small children who don't understand the consequences of their actions. Jessica blinked. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. "Oh, that's right," I continued, picking up my glass of water and taking a sip. "I'm the owner of this apartment." I paused. I let those words settle. I let every person at that table process what they had just heard. In fact, until today, I was. The silence that followed was absolute. No one breathed. No one moved. The glasses were suspended halfway to their mouths. Forks froze over plates. Everyone staring at me as if I had just materialized out of thin air. As if the invisible woman had suddenly become the only visible person in the room. I stood up calmly. I folded my napkin and placed it next to my plate. I walked toward my little room in the back without looking back. My steps echoed in the silence. I could feel the weight of their stares on my back. I heard Michael's voice behind me. "Mom. Wait. Mom." He sounded scared. He sounded like he did when he was a boy and had broken something valuable. But I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I kept walking until I reached my room. I went in. I closed the door. I turned the lock. And then, alone in that cramped little room next to the laundry, I began to tremble. I sat on the edge of my twin bed. That narrow bed that barely fit between the boxes of things Jessica had decided to store in my room. Boxes with Christmas decorations. Boxes with clothes she no longer wore. Boxes with memories that weren't mine. My room had become a storage unit, and I was the invisible guardian of her belongings. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it echoing in my ears. I took a deep breath. Once. Twice. Trying to calm the storm that had broken loose inside my chest. It wasn't just anger. It was something deeper, more painful. It was the accumulation of 3 years of small humiliations that had grown into a mountain impossible to ignore. Outside, I heard confused voices. Jessica's friends saying hurried goodbyes, awkward murmurs, the front door opening and closing several times, hurried footsteps, then silence. A dense, heavy silence that settled over the apartment like a thick fog. I knew they were out there. Michael and Jessica. Probably arguing in whispers. Probably wondering if I was serious. I was completely serious. I looked around my little room. The cream-colored walls that were once white. The tiny closet where my clothes hung crammed together. The small window that looked out onto the dark alley where cats fought over scraps of food. This was my reality. This was the space they had assigned me in the apartment that had my name on the deed, on the property that I had bought with years of work, and I had accepted it. I had accepted making myself small because I thought that's how I would keep the peace. Because Michael had told me that modern mothers-in-law don't meddle in their married children's lives. Because Jessica had cried, saying she felt invaded in her own home. Because I believed it was my duty as a mother to sacrifice myself one more time. Always one more time. But that night, something changed. That laugh, my son's laugh joining the chorus of mockery. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. I couldn't keep pretending this was okay. I couldn't keep justifying the unjustifiable. I got up and walked to the small mirror hanging on the wall. I looked at myself. I really looked. A 68-year-old woman looked back at me, gray hair pulled back in a simple bun, deep wrinkles around my eyes, hands rough from so much work. A simple olive green dress that I had washed 1,000 times. This was me, Eleanor. The woman who had once been strong. The woman who had built a business from scratch. The woman who had survived poverty, widowhood, loneliness. When had I become so invisible? When had I allowed them to treat me as if I were worthless? The answer came, clear and painful. It had started 3 years ago. 3 years since Thomas, my husband, died. 3 years since my world collapsed and I was left floating without an anchor. 3 years since Michael suggested I move in with them so I wouldn't be alone. As if he were doing me a favor. As if it weren't my own apartment. I needed to remember who I was before I became this ghost. I needed to go back to the beginning, to when Thomas and I were young and had nothing but dreams and determination. I closed my eyes and let the memories come. I met Thomas when I was 23. I was working, washing other people's clothes in a poor neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. My hands were always red and cracked from the soap and cold water. I got up before dawn and finished when the moon was already high. I earned just enough to pay the rent on a tiny room where I shared a bathroom with 5 other families. Thomas worked in construction. I saw him for the first time when he came to drop off some shirts his boss needed washed. He was tall, with broad shoulders from physical labor. He had large, calloused hands but kind eyes. He smiled at me, and I felt something stir in my chest, something I hadn't felt before. He came back the next week, and the next, always with some excuse. That his boss needed more clothes washed. That he himself had dirty shirts. That he wanted to ask me about prices, until he finally admitted the truth. He was coming because he wanted to see me, because he couldn't stop thinking about me. We got married 6 months later in a small ceremony. No elegant dress, no big party. Just the 2 of us, a justice of the peace, and 2 witnesses we found on the street. But it was the happiest day of my life. Because Thomas looked at me as if I were the most valuable woman in the world. As if together we could conquer anything. And we did. Thomas was a dreamer, but also a tireless worker. He said we wouldn't spend our whole lives being poor. That we would build something of our own. That our children wouldn't know hunger as we had. I believed him. We worked like animals for years. He in construction during the day and at extra jobs at night. Me washing clothes until my hands bled. We saved every penny. Every single penny. We kept the money in a coffee can hidden under the mattress. We ate beans and rice. We didn't buy new clothes. We didn't go to the movies. We had no luxuries. We just had one goal. To save enough money to buy something of our own. Thomas learned carpentry. He started making furniture in our small patio. First, simple chairs. Then tables. Then entire wardrobes. People started seeking him out for his work. They said it was quality. That it lasted. That it was worth every dollar spent. When I got pregnant with Michael, we were 28. I cried with happiness when I saw the 2 lines on the test. Thomas picked me up and spun me around, even though I yelled at him to put me down because I was getting dizzy. We were building our family. We were building our future. Michael was born in a public hospital after 18 hours of labor. He was small, but strong. He cried with powerful lungs. Thomas held him with those enormous hands of his and cried. My tough, hard-working husband cried like a child seeing his son. I worked until the last day of my pregnancy. I went back to work 2 weeks after giving birth. I carried Michael strapped to my back while I washed clothes. I slept when he slept. I ate what was left over after feeding him. My body ached constantly, but it didn't matter. We had a son. We had a purpose bigger than ourselves. Thomas worked 18 hours a day. I watched him leave before dawn and come back when Michael was already asleep. Sometimes he'd come home so tired he'd fall asleep in his work clothes. But he never complained. He never said it was too much. Because we had a plan. And that plan worked. When Michael was 3, we bought our first property. It was nothing fancy. It was a small apartment in an old building. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a tiny kitchen. But it was ours. Completely ours. I cried the day we signed the papers. I cried so hard the notary had to give me a glass of water. That was just the first one. Thomas turned his carpentry into a real business. He hired 2 helpers, then 5, then 10. They made furniture for stores, for offices, for restaurants. The money started coming in faster. We weren't rich, but we weren't poor anymore. We bought a second property 5 years later. Then a third. We rented them out. We reinvested the rent money. Thomas said that money should work for us, not us for the money. We had a plan for the future, a plan to make sure Michael would go to a good college, a plan for our old age, a plan to be okay. Michael grew up in the midst of that work. He never lacked food. He never lacked school supplies. He never lacked clean clothes. But we didn't spoil him either. We taught him the value of effort. We taught him that nothing came easy. We taught him that honest work was the only way. Or so we thought. Michael was a good student. He got high grades. He participated in school activities. He had friends. He was polite to the neighbors. Everyone said we had an exemplary son. And I believed them. I wanted to believe them, because I had put all my effort into raising him right. When he finished high school, we enrolled him in college, a prestigious private university. It cost a fortune, but Thomas insisted. He said our son deserved the best opportunities. That's what we had worked like donkeys for 20 years for. I agreed. We sold one of the properties to pay for his entire education. Michael studied business administration. He graduated with honors. He got a job at an important company. He earned good money, much better than Thomas and I had earned at his age. We were proud. We thought all our sacrifice had been worth it. He met Jessica at his job. She was an assistant to a manager in another department. Pretty, elegant, always well-dressed. The first time Michael introduced her to us, I noticed something in her eyes, a hardness she tried to hide behind perfect smiles. But I didn't say anything. I thought maybe it was my imagination. I thought I was being a paranoid mother-in-law, like the ones in soap operas. They got married 2 years later. A big, expensive wedding. Jessica wanted everything perfect. The imported dress, the most exclusive venue in the city, expensive flowers, elaborate food. The wedding cost over $30,000. Thomas and I paid for half of it. He was our only son. We wanted him to be happy. For the first few years, everything seemed to go well. Michael still visited us on Sundays. Jessica came with him, although she always seemed bored. She complained about the heat. She complained about the food. She complained about the neighborhood. But I made an effort to please her. I cooked her favorite dishes. I asked about her work. I gave her gifts I thought she would like. Nothing was ever enough. Thomas noticed it before I did. One afternoon he told me that Jessica was pulling Michael away from us, that they came less and less, that when they did come, Michael seemed tense, that something was changing. I told him he was exaggerating, that children grow up and form their own families, that it was natural. But Thomas was right. The visits became every other week, then monthly, then almost non-existent. Michael always had excuses. Too much work, plans with Jessica's friends, tiredness, commitments. I missed my son, but I didn't want to pressure him. I didn't want to be that suffocating mother who doesn't let her children live. Then Thomas got sick. It started with stomach pains that he ignored. He said it was gastritis from eating at odd hours. I insisted he go to the doctor, but he refused. He hated hospitals. He said they were for weak people, and he wasn't weak, until one night he collapsed in the bathroom. I found him unconscious on the floor. I called the ambulance, shaking so hard I could barely dial the numbers. Pancreatic cancer. Advanced stage. The doctor gave us 6 months. Maybe less. The words fell on me like rocks. 6 months. My husband. My life partner. The man who had built everything with me. He had 6 months to live. I called Michael, crying. I explained everything. I begged him to come. He arrived at the hospital 3 days later. 3 days. He said he'd had important meetings at work, that he couldn't cancel them. Jessica didn't even come. She said hospitals made her nervous. Thomas lasted 4 months. 4 months of agony. 4 months of watching him waste away. 4 months of holding his hand while the pain tore him apart. Michael came to visit him 5 times in total. 5 times in 4 months. Always in a hurry. Always checking his watch. Always with the excuse of work. The night Thomas died, I was alone with him. Michael had promised to come, but he called saying Jessica had an important dinner with her boss, that he would come the next day. But there was no next day. Thomas died at 3 in the morning. He died holding my hand. His last words were to tell me he loved me, that he had been happy with me, that I should take care of our son. I promised him I would. The funeral was small. Thomas never wanted fanfare. We asked that in lieu of flowers, people donate to an orphanage. Michael arrived late. Jessica wore dark sunglasses and complained about the heat during the whole ceremony. They left immediately after the burial. They had plans for the evening. I was left alone in the house we had built together, surrounded by memories, surrounded by silence, surrounded by a pain so intense that some days I couldn't even get out of bed. Michael called once a week. Short, superficial conversations. He'd ask how I was, but he didn't wait for a real answer. I'd say I was fine because I didn't want to worry him. 6 months passed. 6 months of crushing loneliness. 6 months of crying every night. 6 months of feeling like I had no purpose left. Then Michael came over one Sunday with a proposal. He said he and Jessica had been talking, that they were worried about me being alone, that they wanted me to move in with them. "We have space, Mom," he said with that smile I'd known since he was a boy. "You shouldn't be alone in this big house. Come with us. We'll be a family." I cried with happiness. My son wanted me close. My son needed me. I wouldn't be alone anymore. I accepted immediately. I didn't ask for details. I didn't ask where I would live. I didn't ask anything. I just said yes. I sold the house where I had lived with Thomas. The house full of memories. I used part of the money to buy the apartment where they were renting. It was a good apartment. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, spacious living room, modern kitchen, an exclusive part of the city. It cost $200,000. I put it in my name, but they would live there without paying rent. It was my gift, my way of being close to my son. Michael was thrilled when I gave him the deed. He hugged me tight. He said I was the best mom in the world, that he loved me, that he would always take care of me. Jessica smiled, but that smile didn't reach her eyes. She said thank you in a flat voice. Then she asked me where I was going to sleep. "I thought in the guest room," I said innocently. Jessica exchanged a look with Michael. "Well, we use that room as an office," she explained. "And the master is ours. And the other one is our walk-in closet. But we have the service room. It's small but comfortable. It has its own bathroom. I'm sure you'll be fine there. The service room. The room where domestic helpers slept in big houses. The smallest room in the apartment. Located next to the laundry room, with a window facing the alley. That would be my space in the apartment that I had just bought." I should have said something. I should have refused. I should have set boundaries from the beginning. But I had just lost my husband. I was vulnerable. I was alone. I was desperate to have family close. So I said it was fine, that I didn't need much space, that I just wanted to be near them. That was my first big mistake. I moved in with 2 suitcases of clothes and a few boxes of personal items. Jessica decided that my old furniture didn't match the apartment's decor, that it was better to sell it or give it away, that they already had everything they needed. I sold almost everything. Furniture Thomas had made with his own hands. The table where we had eaten for 30 years. The armchair where Michael had taken his first steps. Everything disappeared. The first few weeks, I tried to adapt. I tried to be useful. I cooked. I cleaned. I did laundry. I ironed. I did the grocery shopping. I paid the apartment's utility bills. Anything to feel like I was part of something. Anything to not be a burden. Jessica started giving me orders, subtle at first. "Eleanor, could you wash this? Eleanor, we're out of coffee. Eleanor, The bathroom needs cleaning. Then more direct, more demanding, more cruel. She treated me like a domestic employee, like a maid, as if I worked for her, and I allowed it. Michael never said anything. When Jessica spoke to me in that derogatory tone, he would look the other way. When she gave me orders, as if I were her employee, he would go to another room. When I tried to talk to him about how I felt, he was always in a hurry. He always had something more important to do. He always told me I was exaggerating, that Jessica was just stressed from work, that I should be more understanding. Understanding, that word became the justification for everything. Be understanding, Mom. Understand her position, Mom. Don't make trouble, Mom. As if my feelings didn't matter, as if my comfort wasn't relevant, as if I existed solely to serve and be quiet. Months turned into a year, then 2, then 3. 3 years living like a ghost in my own property. 3 years waking up before them to have breakfast ready. 3 years cleaning every corner of that apartment until it was spotless. 3 years listening to complaints about how I folded the towels or how I cooked the rice. Nothing I did was good enough for Jessica. I became a shadow. I learned to move silently so as not to bother them. I learned to eat quickly in the kitchen before they got up. I learned to keep myself busy to justify my existence. I learned to make myself invisible because that's what they wanted. A presence that solved problems without being seen or heard. Jessica's friends came over often. Elegant women who drank wine and talked about expensive things. I served them snacks that I prepared carefully. I spent hours in the kitchen making perfect canapés. No one thanked me. They didn't even look at me when I placed the trays on the table. To them, I was part of the service, a functional element of the apartment, like the refrigerator or the stove. Once, I heard Jessica talking about me with her friends. I was in the kitchen washing dishes. They were in the living room. Their voices carried clearly. It's unbearable having her here all the time, Jessica was saying. But Michael insists we can't kick her out. She's his mother. Her friends laughed. One said something about nursing homes. Another suggested finding her a small apartment far away. Jessica sighed dramatically. If it were up to me, she'd already be living somewhere else. But you know how sons are with their mothers, always with that ridiculous guilt. I froze in front of the sink, my hands submerged in soapy water. My heart beating so hard, I thought it would burst out of my chest. That's how she saw me, as a burden, as an obstacle, as something she wanted to get rid of, but couldn't. And Michael knew. My son knew how his wife treated me and did nothing to stop it. That night, I tried to talk to him. I waited until Jessica fell asleep. I knocked on his bedroom door softly. Michael opened it with an annoyed look on his face. "What is it, Mom?" "It's late." I told him we needed to talk, that things weren't right, that I didn't feel comfortable in that house, that I needed him to set boundaries with Jessica. He looked at me as if I were asking for the impossible. "Mom, you're exaggerating again," he said in a tired voice. "Jessica treats you fine. You have a roof over your head, food, everything you need. I don't know what you're complaining about." I reminded him that I had bought that apartment, that technically it was my house. His expression changed. It hardened. "Are you holding that over my head? Seriously? I thought you did it because you loved me, not because you expected something in return." I was speechless. He was turning the situation around, making me look like the bad guy, the one calling in favors, when all I wanted was a little respect, a little consideration, a little love from the son I had raised with so much sacrifice. "Go to sleep, Mom," he said, closing the door in my face. "We'll talk tomorrow when you're calmer." But tomorrow never came. He avoided the topic. He acted as if that conversation had never happened, and I didn't try again. It became clear to me that I was alone, that I couldn't count on my son, that I had lost the Michael I knew, and in his place was a stranger who prioritized his wife's comfort over his mother's well-being. The days became more difficult after that. Jessica seemed to feel she had a free pass to treat me worse. Her comments became crueler, her demands more absurd. She'd ask me to clean things I had just cleaned. She'd ask me to cook elaborate dishes and then say she wasn't hungry. She'd ask me to run ridiculous errands just to get me out of the apartment for hours. Once, She asked me to go to the other side of the city to buy a specific type of bread. I took 2 buses to get there. I waited 40 minutes in line. I returned 3 hours later with the bread. She looked at it, wrinkled her nose, and said, "I'm in the mood for something else now." She threw the bread in the trash in front of me. Michael was there. He saw the whole thing. He said nothing. He just kept watching television as if nothing had happened. That night, I cried in my little room. I cried for the woman I had become. I cried for Thomas, who was no longer there to defend me. I cried for my son, who had transformed into someone unrecognizable. I cried for all the years I had dedicated to building a family that now despised me. I felt empty, exhausted, without purpose, without value. I thought about leaving, finding another place to live, getting my dignity back. But something stopped me. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was a foolish hope that things would change. Maybe it was fear of loneliness. Or maybe it was that I still loved my son, despite everything. I still held out hope of getting back the sweet boy he had been. The hard-working young man who used to hug me and tell me I was his hero. Then came the night of Michael's birthday, the night that changed everything. The night Jessica finally crossed the line she shouldn't have crossed. The public humiliation was the push I needed, the awakening I had been avoiding for 3 years. When I closed the door to my little room that night and heard their voices arguing outside, I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt pain. Deep, old pain that I had been holding on to for too long. But I also felt something else, something I hadn't felt in years. I felt anger, clean, righteous anger. Anger that gave me clarity. I sat on my bed and looked around. This miserable little room, this narrow bed, this tiny closet, this dirty window. This was my reality by my own choice, because I had allowed them to treat me this way, because I had confused love with servitude, because I had thought that sacrificing myself was the same as being a good mother, but not anymore. I got up and started pulling my things out of the closet. I didn't have much, a few dresses, a few blouses, a sweater, comfortable shoes, underwear. It all fit into 2 old suitcases. 3 years of my life reduced to 2 suitcases. It was pathetic. It was sad. It was liberating. As I packed, I heard a knock on the door. Michael's voice came from the other side. "Mom, open up. We need to talk." I didn't answer. I kept folding clothes. "Mom, please. I know you're upset, but it was just a joke. Jessica didn't mean to offend you. A joke." They reduced my humiliation to a simple joke. As if my feelings were an overreaction, as if I were too sensitive to understand humor. "Mom, open the door," Michael insisted. His voice sounded worried now. He was probably starting to understand that I was serious. That this time, I wasn't going to give in. That something fundamental had changed. "If you don't open up, I'm going to think you're sick. I'm going to break down the door." A lie. He wasn't going to do anything. He was just trying to manipulate me, as always, appealing to my role as a worried mother, hoping I would come running out to comfort him. I didn't. I waited in silence until his footsteps moved away. I heard murmurs. Jessica saying something in an irritated voice. Michael responding in a defensive tone. Then the door to their bedroom closing forcefully. After that, only silence. A dense silence that filled the whole apartment like slowly rising water. I finished packing around midnight. 2 suitcases on my bed. My entire life reduced to that. I looked around one last time. Jessica's boxes piled against the wall, the small window with the view of the dark alley, the cream-colored walls that needed fresh paint. This place had been my prison for 3 years, a prison I had built myself with my decisions, with my need to be needed, with my inability to set boundaries. But tonight, something had awakened in me, something that had been dormant for too long. The woman I had been before I became a shadow, the woman who had worked until she bled to build a future, the woman who had survived poverty and loss. That woman still existed beneath all the layers of submission and fear, and she was ready to come out. I took off the olive green dress and put on comfortable clothes to sleep in. But I didn't sleep. I sat on the bed, looking at the suitcases, thinking, planning, remembering things I had deliberately forgotten. Important things I had pushed to the back of my mind because they hurt too much. After Thomas's funeral, his lawyer had called me. Hugo, a man in his 60s with thick glasses and formal manners. He had been Thomas's friend for decades. He asked me to come to his office to review the will and other documents. I went a week later. I was still dazed with grief. I still couldn't believe Thomas was gone. Hugo received me with coffee and kind words. Then he opened a thick folder full of papers. He began to explain the properties that Thomas and I owned together. I knew about 3. The house where we had lived, a small apartment we rented out, a commercial space downtown that also generated monthly rent. That's what I knew. That's what I thought we had. But Hugo continued. There were more properties Thomas had bought over the last 10 years without telling me. Not out of distrust. Not to hide things from me, but because he wanted to surprise me. Because he wanted to make sure I was protected if anything happened to him. Because he loved me in a way so deep that he thought about my future even when he would no longer be in it. 5 more properties, 2 apartments in central areas, a 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood, a large plot of land on the outskirts of the city, a commercial office in a new building. All rented, all generating monthly income. Hugo showed me the contracts, the rent receipts, the account statements. I was earning almost $4,000 a month just from rent. $4,000 that I knew nothing about. Thomas was very careful, Hugo explained, adjusting his glasses. He wanted you to have financial security, for you to never depend on anyone, for you to live with dignity. He showed me more papers. Savings accounts, investments, shares in the carpentry company that Thomas had sold 2 years before he died. The total was staggering. Almost $500,000 in liquid assets, plus the properties. I was speechless. $500,000. Properties generating income. I wasn't poor. I wasn't dependent on anyone. I had enough resources to live comfortably for the rest of my life. Why then had I become a servant in my son's house? Why had I agreed to live in a miserable little room? Why had I allowed them to treat me like trash? Because it wasn't about the money. It was about the loneliness, the fear of being alone after losing Thomas, the desperate desire to have family close, the blind love for my son that kept me from seeing reality. I had traded dignity for company. I had traded respect for the illusion of belonging, and they had taken advantage of it. Hugo had given me all the documents that afternoon. He explained that I could call him whenever I needed help managing the properties, that he would continue to manage everything if I wanted, that I shouldn't worry about a thing. I thanked him and put everything in a folder, which I later put in a box. That box that was now in my little room. That box I hadn't opened in 3 years because it hurt to remember, because every paper was evidence of Thomas's love, of his care, of his foresight. I got up from the bed and looked for that box under a pile of old sheets Jessica had decided to store in my closet. I pulled it out carefully. It was dusty. I opened it. There they were, all the documents, property deeds, bank statements, rental contracts, Hugo's card with his phone number, all intact, all waiting for me to finally have the courage to use them. I took out the papers and reviewed them one by one. I read every deed, every contract, every bank statement. My wealth was real. It wasn't a fantasy. It wasn't an exaggeration. I had the resources to live independently, to never again allow anyone to treat me as inferior, to get my dignity back. Why had I waited so long? Why had I allowed 3 years to pass, living like a beggar when I had all this? The answer was clear and painful, because I had put maternal love above my own well-being. Because I had believed that being a good mother meant sacrificing yourself until you disappeared. Because I had confused love with self-destruction. But that night, the scales fell from my eyes. I picked up my phone. It was 2 a.m, but I didn't care. I looked up the number of the hotel that was 10 blocks from the apartment. A discreet but clean hotel I had seen many times when I was out running errands. I called. A sleepy voice answered. I booked a room for that same night. I said I would be there in an hour. I paid with the credit card I almost never used. Then I called a taxi. I gave the address in a low voice. The driver said he would be there in 15 minutes. I hung up and looked at my suitcases. It was time to go. It was time to stop being a victim. It was time to remind everyone who I really was. I changed my clothes. I put on a simple gray dress. I pulled my hair back. I washed my face. I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman who looked back at me was different. She no longer had that defeated expression. Her shoulders were no longer slumped. There was determination in my eyes. There was strength in my posture. There was dignity in my silence. I heard the taxi's horn outside. I grabbed my suitcases. I opened the door to my little room carefully. The apartment was dark and silent. I walked toward the exit without making a sound. My steps were sure. My decision was firm. I didn't look back. I didn't feel any doubt. I just felt relief. An immense relief to finally be doing the right thing. I left the apartment, closing the door softly. I went down the stairs. The taxi was waiting with the engine running. The driver got out to help me with the suitcases. "Long trip, ma'am?" he asked kindly. "No," I replied. "Just a new beginning." He smiled, not really understanding, but he nodded. We got in the taxi and drove away. I looked out the window at the building where I had lived for the last 3 years. The dark windows, the elegant walls, the lit entrance. Inside, my son was sleeping. Inside, the woman who had humiliated me was sleeping. Inside was the life I had been living as a ghost. But not anymore. That life had ended tonight. The hotel was modest but welcoming. The receptionist gave me a key to a room on the 3rd floor. I went up with my suitcases. I opened the door. The room was small but clean. A double bed with white sheets. A private bathroom. A window with thick curtains. A small table with a chair. An old television mounted on the wall. It wasn't luxury, but it was mine. It was my space. No one would tell me where to sleep. No one would give me orders. No one would make me feel inferior. I sat on the bed and finally let the tears come. I cried for everything I had lost. I cried for the wasted years. I cried for the broken relationship with my son. I cried for Thomas, who was no longer here to see me regain my strength. I cried until I was empty, until there were no more tears left, until all that remained was clarity, determination, purpose. Tomorrow, I would call Hugo. Tomorrow, I would start to take control of my life. Tomorrow, the plan would begin. But tonight, I just needed to rest. I needed to sleep in peace for the first time in 3 years. I woke up at 6 in the morning. The sun was just beginning to filter through the curtains of the hotel room. For the first time in years, I didn't jump out of bed to make breakfast for others. I didn't leap up to make sure everything was perfect before they woke up. I just lay there, looking at the ceiling, breathing, feeling the silence. It was a different kind of silence. Not heavy, not filled with tension. It was a calm, peaceful silence. I took a long shower. I let the hot water run over my body for 20 minutes. No rushing, no one banging on the door asking how much longer I was going to be. No Jessica complaining that I was using too much hot water. Just me and the steam filling the small bathroom. I got dressed slowly. I chose comfortable clothes, a pair of soft pants, a beige blouse, low-heeled shoes. I pulled my hair back into a simple ponytail. I looked in the mirror and saw a different woman from the day before. I went down to the hotel's dining area. I poured coffee into a white mug. I had toast and jam. I sat by the window. I ate slowly, watching the street wake up. People walking to their jobs. Buses passing. Vendors opening their stalls. Life was going on as normal outside, while mine had taken a complete turn. No one on that street knew that I had just freed myself, that I had just taken the first step toward reclaiming my dignity. And that was fine. I didn't need witnesses. I just needed conviction. After breakfast, I went back to my room. I took Hugo's card out of my wallet. I looked at it for several minutes. This was the next step. Calling him, asking for help, starting to take control of what was legally mine. I dialed the number with trembling hands. It rang 3 times before he answered. Sandoval Law Office. Good morning. It was Hugo's voice. Formal, but kind. Hugo, it's Eleanor, Thomas's widow. My voice sounded firmer than I expected. There was a pause. Mrs. Eleanor, what a pleasure to hear from you. It's been years. How are you? I've been better. I need to see you. I need help with the properties. With everything. The words came out in a rush, as if I were afraid of losing my courage if I stopped. Of course. When can you come to my office? His tone became professional, focused. Today? Is today possible? I sounded desperate, but I didn't care. Let me check my schedule. I heard papers rustling. Computer keys. I can see you at 11. Does that work for you? Perfect. I'll be there. Thank you, Hugo. I hung up and looked at the clock. It was 8:30. I had 2.5 hours to prepare myself mentally, to organize all the documents, to be ready to make decisions that would change everything. I sat on the bed and took the papers out of the box again. I organized them in order. Deeds, contracts, bank statements, everything neat, everything clear, all mine. At 10:15, I left the hotel. I took a taxi downtown. Hugo's office was in an old but well-maintained building, 3rd floor. A wooden door with a gold plaque that read Sandoval Law Office. I knocked. A young secretary greeted me and asked me to wait. I sat in a worn leather chair. The walls were covered with diplomas and photographs. Hugo with different people. Hugo at legal events. Hugo with Thomas. I paused at that photo, my smiling husband next to his friend, both younger, both full of life. I felt a lump in my throat, but I swallowed it. Mrs. Eleanor, please come in. Hugo appeared in his office doorway. He had aged. More gray hair, more wrinkles, but the same thick glasses, the same kind smile. I stood up and went in. His office smelled of old books and coffee. There were metal filing cabinets against the walls. A large desk covered in folders. 2 visitor chairs. Please, sit. He gestured me to one of the chairs. I obeyed. I placed my bag with the documents on my lap. It's very good to see you. It's been almost 3 years since last time. How have you been? I didn't answer right away. How do you summarize 3 years of humiliation? How do you explain that you've been living like a servant in your own property? I decided to be direct. I haven't been well, Hugo. I made mistakes, but I'm here to fix them. He nodded slowly. Tell me, what do you need? I told him everything. From the beginning, how I had sold the house to buy the apartment where Michael lived. How I had moved in with them, thinking it was a good idea. How I had ended up living in the service room. How they treated me. The humiliation from last night. My decision to leave. I spoke for 20 minutes without stopping. Hugo listened without interrupting. He took notes occasionally. His expression grew more serious with each detail. When I finished, he took off his glasses and cleaned them with a handkerchief. Mrs. Eleanor, I am very sorry for what you have experienced, but let me tell you something important. You are not unprotected. You have resources. You have power. You just need to use it. I know. That's why I'm here. I want to get control of everything back. I want to know exactly what I have. I want to know what my options are. My voice was firm now. Decided. Hugo put his glasses back on. He opened a file on his computer. All right, let's review everything from the beginning. The properties you inherited from Thomas are all in your name. 5 rented properties that generate approximately $4,000 a month. The apartment where your son lives is also in your name. You bought it with money from the sale of your previous house. Correct, I paid $200,000. All cash. The deed is in my name. Perfect. So legally, you are the owner. Your son and daughter-in-law are tenants. Even if they don't pay rent, they are still tenants. He paused. Do they know this? My son knows. I gave him the deed when I bought the apartment. But I don't think he ever told Jessica. She thought they were the owners. Hugo nodded. Interesting. And what do you want to do about it? That was the question. What did I want to do? I could evict them. I could sell the apartment. I could charge them rent. I had many options. But none of them gave me satisfaction. I didn't want revenge. I wanted something deeper. I wanted them to learn. I wanted them to understand the value of what they had and despised. I want to wait, I said finally. I want to see what they do now that I'm not there. I want to see if they look for me, if they worry, if they finally understand anything. And in the meantime, Hugo asked. In the meantime, I want to move into one of the properties. I want to start living off my rental income. I want to be independent. I want to live with dignity. The words came out clearly. Without a doubt. Hugo smiled. That seems like an excellent plan. I have a perfect property for you. It's the 3-bedroom house. The current tenants moved out last month. It's empty. It's in good condition, a quiet area. Would you like to see it? Yes, today if possible. Let me make a call. Hugo dialed a number. He spoke to someone briefly. He hung up. We can go in an hour. I'll take you. I need to see the property anyway to make sure everything is in order. We spent the next hour reviewing all my documents. Hugo explained every contract to me, every income, every expense. He showed me updated bank statements. I had more money than I remembered. The investments Thomas had made had grown. My rental income was steady. I was fine, better than fine. I was in a position to never depend on anyone again. One more thing, Hugo said before we left. The apartment where your son lives. Do you want me to send them a legal notice? Do you want to establish a lease agreement? Do you want them to pay rent? I thought about it. Not yet. Give me a month. I want to see how things develop. I want to see if Michael finally reacts. As you wish. But remember that legally, you can take back that property whenever you want. It's yours. We went in Hugo's car to see the house. It was 30 minutes from downtown. A quiet residential neighborhood. Clean streets. Trees on the sidewalks. Well-maintained houses with small yards. We stopped in front of a cream-colored house with a red-tiled roof. It had a small front yard with wildflowers. An iron gate. Large windows. Hugo opened the door. We went inside. The house smelled clean. New. A spacious living room with natural light. A modern kitchen. 3 bedrooms, as he had said. 2 full baths. A backyard with space for plants. It was perfect. It was exactly what I needed. What do you think? Hugo asked. I'll take it. I'll move in tomorrow. I moved into the house 2 days later. Hugo helped me with everything. He hired a small moving company to bring my suitcases from the hotel. He helped me buy basic furniture, a comfortable bed, a soft sofa, a dining table, new appliances for the kitchen. In 3 days, the empty house became my home. My real home. The first space that was completely mine in 3 years. During those days, my phone rang constantly. Michael called over and over. He left voicemails. Mom, where are you? We're worried. Please call. At first, he sounded confused, then worried, then annoyed, then desperate. I didn't answer a single call. I didn't read his text messages. I needed this time for myself. To get settled. To breathe without his presence. Jessica also tried to contact me. Her messages were different. Eleanor, we need to talk. I think there was a misunderstanding. Come home, home. She called the place where she had humiliated me home, where she had treated me like trash. I deleted her messages without reading them fully. She didn't deserve my attention. The 3rd week, I received a different call. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to. Mrs. Eleanor? It was a young, nervous, female voice. I'm Patricia. I work in the building where your son's apartment is. I'm the building manager. Yes, Patricia? I sat down on my new sofa. My heart started to beat faster. I'm sorry to bother you. I got your number from Mr. Sandoval, the lawyer. It's just that there's a problem. Your son and daughter-in-law haven't paid the building's condo fees in 3 months. They owe almost $1,200. And now they're saying, you're the owner, that you have to pay. That's right. I smiled. So the problems had already started. Yes, I am the owner. But they live there. They are responsible for the expenses. I understand. But they insist that you have to take care of it. They say it's a family agreement. Patricia sounded uncomfortable. Look, I don't want to get into family problems. I just need someone to pay. Give me a week. I'll take care of it. I hung up and sat there thinking. $1,200 in overdue fees. What were they spending their money on? Why couldn't they pay for something so basic? I called Hugo. Hugo, I need information. Can you investigate my son's financial situation? Discreetly, but completely. Are you sure? That might reveal some difficult things. I'm sure. I need to know the truth. It took Hugo 4 days. He called me one afternoon. Mrs. Eleanor, I have the information. Do you want me to come to your house? Or do you prefer to come to my office? Come to my house. I'll make coffee. Hugo arrived an hour later with a thick folder. We sat in my dining room. I poured coffee, and he opened the folder. It's not good news, he began. Your son has debts. A lot of debts. Personal loans. Maxed out credit cards. A loan for a luxury car he can't afford. In total, he owes approximately $80,000. I couldn't breathe. $80,000? How is that possible? A lifestyle beyond their means. Jessica, apparently, spends a lot. Expensive clothes. Exclusive restaurants. Trips. And your son doesn't tell her no. He's been taking out loans to keep up appearances. Hugo showed me documents, bank statements, loan agreements. It was all there. All real. Does he know I have money? That I have properties? I asked. Yes. He was present when Thomas made his will. He knew you would inherit everything. In fact, Hugo paused uncomfortably. There's something else. Your son went to the bank 6 months ago. He tried to get a loan using the apartment as collateral. But he couldn't because the property is in your name, not his. The betrayal hit me like a punch. My son had tried to use my property without asking me. Without my permission, he had just assumed he could, that everything that was mine was his. That I didn't count. What else? I asked in a trembling voice. The lenders are putting on pressure. There are threats of lawsuits, of wage garnishment. Your son is desperate. That's why I think the humiliation that night wasn't accidental. I think Jessica wanted you to leave. She wanted the apartment for themselves. She wanted to use it to solve their financial problems. It all started to make sense. The mistreatment wasn't just random cruelty, it was a strategy. They wanted to make my life impossible so I would leave, so they could keep what was mine, to have total control. But their plan failed. I left, but I took everything with me, leaving them with nothing. What do you want to do? Hugo asked. Nothing. Not yet. I want to see how far this goes. I want to see if my son finally has the courage to come ask me for help with humility, with honesty, or if he continues to hide behind his wife. 2 more weeks passed. My phone stopped ringing as much. The messages became less frequent. I thought maybe they had found another solution. Maybe they had borrowed money from someone else. Maybe they had sold something. I didn't care. I was busy building my new life, tending my garden, cooking for myself, reading books I had forgotten I loved, being free. Then the call came that changed everything. It was midnight. My phone rang insistently. I looked at the screen. Michael. I hesitated, but something inside me told me to answer. Hello? Mom. His voice sounded broken. Destroyed. Mom, please. I need help. Please. He was crying. My son was crying like I hadn't heard him cry since he was a child. What happened, Michael? I kept my voice neutral, emotionless. Jessica left. She left me. She left with another man, a coworker. She left me with all the debts. She left me all alone. Mom, I've lost everything. They're going to sue me. They're going to take everything. I don't know what to do. The words came out choked between sobs. I felt a pull in my chest. It was my son, my baby, crying, destroyed, asking for help. All my maternal instincts screamed for me to run and save him, to rescue him, to fix everything as I had always done. But another part of me, the part that had awakened that night of humiliation, knew this was necessary, that this was the process, that he needed to hit rock bottom to understand. Where are you? I asked. In the apartment. Alone. Mom, can you come? Please. I need you. I'll be there. Give me an hour. I hung up. I sat on my bed, staring into the darkness. Was I doing the right thing? Should I go? Should I help him? I didn't have clear answers. I only knew I needed to see him. I needed to see if this pain had finally opened his eyes. I got dressed. I took my car. I drove to the apartment that had been my prison. The building looked the same, elegant, imposing, lit up. I went up the stairs. My heart was pounding. I got to the door. I knocked softly. Michael opened it immediately. He looked terrible. Red, swollen eyes, a beard of several days, wrinkled clothes. He had lost weight. He looked shattered. He looked at me and started to cry again. "Mom," was all he could say before he hugged me. I let him. I let him cry on my shoulder as he had done 1,000 times when he was a child. I felt his body tremble. I heard his sobs. Part of me wanted to comfort him, to tell him everything would be okay. That mom would fix everything. But I held firm. I just held him. No words, no promises, just presence. When he finally calmed down, we went inside. The apartment was a disaster. Dirty dishes in the kitchen, clothes thrown everywhere. It smelled bad, of neglect, of defeat. We sat on the sofa, the same sofa where I had served dinners, where I had been invisible, where I had been humiliated. "Tell me everything," I said in a calm voice. And he talked. He talked for 2 hours. He told me about the debts, about how Jessica spent without control, about how he took out loans to keep her happy, about how he had tried to use my apartment as collateral, about the fight they had when I left, about how Jessica had blamed him for everything, about how she had been having an affair for months, about how she left that afternoon, leaving him with $80,000 in debt and no way to pay. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said finally. "I'm sorry for everything. I'm sorry for how I treated you. I'm sorry for how I let Jessica treat you. I'm sorry I wasn't the son you deserved. I'm sorry for everything." Tears were streaming down his face. But this time, they weren't tears of self-pity. They were tears of genuine regret. I stayed silent, looking at him. My son, the man who had allowed my humiliation, the man who had laughed while his wife tore me down. Now he was in front of me, broken, vulnerable, asking for forgiveness. But I had learned something important during these weeks of freedom. Apologies with words were easy. True repentance was shown with actions, with real change, with time. "Michael," I said finally, "I've heard you. I've heard your apologies. But I need you to understand something. I can't just forgive and forget. It doesn't work like that. Not after 3 years. Not after everything that happened." He nodded, looking at the floor. "I know. I understand. I don't expect you to forgive me just like that. I just needed you to know that I'm sorry, that I finally see everything I did wrong." "And what are you going to do now?" I asked. "What are you going to do about the debts? About your life?" He shrugged, defeated. "I don't know. I lost my job a week ago. I was fired for poor performance. I was so distracted by my problems I couldn't concentrate. I have to leave this apartment. I can't pay the fees. I can't pay anything. I'm going to have to find something cheaper, much cheaper. Maybe rent a room, look for extra jobs. I don't know how long it will take me to pay everything off, but I'm going to do it." I looked at him, really looked at him, without the filter of blind maternal love, without the excuses I had always manufactured to justify his behavior. I saw a 40-year-old man who had never faced real consequences, who had always had someone rescue him. First, his parents, then me, alone. And now he was alone for the first time in his life. Really alone. And that was exactly what he needed. "This apartment is mine," I said in a clear voice. "The deed is in my name. It always was. I bought it when I moved in with you. Do you remember?" He nodded, ashamed. "I remember. I never thanked you properly. I just took it as if I deserved it, as if it was your obligation. You don't have to leave the apartment," I continued, "but things are going to change. Completely." He looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I mean you can stay, but you're going to pay rent. $1,000 a month, plus the condo fees. And you're going to keep this place spotless. And you are going to get a job. Any job. I don't care if you have to wash dishes or drive a taxi. You are going to work. You are going to pay off your debts, little by little, and you are going to learn to live with what you have, not with what you pretend to have. Mom, I don't have $1,000 for rent. I barely have enough to eat this week. I know. That's why the first 3 months are free. I'm giving you 3 months to get a job and get stable. After that, you pay or you leave. No exceptions. No second chances. Understood? He looked at me with tears in his eyes again. Why? Why are you helping me after everything I did to you? Because you're my son. Because despite everything, I still love you. But more importantly, because you need to learn. You need to learn the value of work, of effort, of respect. The things your father and I tried to teach you, but that you forgot somewhere along the way. This is your chance to remember. Your chance to become the man you should be. Michael stood up and hugged me. This time, the hug was different. It wasn't the desperate hug from before. It was a hug of gratitude, of respect, of understanding. Thank you, Mom. I promise I won't let you down. I'm going to change. I'm really going to change. I'm not interested in promises, I said, pulling away. I'm interested in actions. Show me with actions. The following months were hard for Michael. He got a job as a food delivery driver on a bike. He earned little, but it was honest. Then he added a second job washing cars in the afternoons. He came home exhausted every night, with cracked hands, with an aching body. But he didn't complain. I visited him once a week. I saw how the apartment was kept clean, how he cooked his own meals, how he managed every dollar he earned. On the 3rd month, he paid me his first rent. He came to my house with the cash, wrinkled bills he had saved, dollar by dollar. $1,000 exactly, he said with pride. My first rent, paid with my own work. I took it and gave him a formal receipt. No favors, no exceptions, all professional, all proper. How are the debts? I asked. Slowly, but I'm making progress. I sold the luxury car. That helped pay off a big part. Now I use a bike and public transportation. I'm negotiating with the banks to make smaller monthly payments. It's going to take years, but I'm going to get out of this. I saw something in his eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. Dignity, purpose. He was learning. He was finally learning. One day, he came to my house with something in his hands. An old yellow envelope. I found this while cleaning the apartment. It was in the closet that was yours. In the room where you slept, he handed me the envelope. It had my name written in Thomas's handwriting. My heart stopped. You didn't open it? I asked. No. It has your name on it. It's yours. He sat across from me, expectant. I opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a folded letter. I opened it and immediately recognized my husband's writing. I began to read aloud. My dearest Eleanor, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. Forgive me for leaving you alone. Forgive me for not being able to keep my promise to grow old with you. But I want you to know something important. Everything we built was for you. For you. The properties. The money. Everything. I want you to live well. To never depend on anyone. To be free and happy. And Michael, if you are reading this with your mother, listen closely. Your mother is the strongest woman I have ever known. The woman who sacrificed everything for our family. Take care of her. Respect her. Honor her. Not because I'm asking you to, but because she deserves it. And if you ever make her suffer, remember this. Everything you have in this life is thanks to her work, to her love, to her sacrifice. Never forget that. I love you both, Thomas. Silence filled the room. Michael had tears running down his face. I was crying too. Thomas's words hit us with their truth, with their love, with their wisdom. He had known. Somehow, he had known we would need these words, that we would need this reminder. I failed, Michael said in a broken voice. I failed, Dad. I failed you. I forgot everything he taught me. But you're remembering now, I replied, taking his hand. That's what matters, that you're remembering, that you're changing. Your father would be proud to see you now, working honestly, facing your mistakes, growing. Do you think you can ever completely forgive me? He asked in a small voice. I've already forgiven you, Michael. I forgave you the day you came to me, broken and honest. But forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't turn back time. It just allows us to move forward. And that's what we're doing. Moving forward. Together, but different. You as a responsible man. Me as a woman who got her value back. 6 more months passed. Michael continued to work hard. He paid his rent on time. He visited my house on Sundays. We cooked together. We talked. Really talked. Not just superficial words. Real conversations about life. About mistake. About lesson learned. About second chances. One Sunday, he arrived with someone. A woman his age. Simple. With a genuine smile. Mom, I want to introduce you to Elena. She works with me in the delivery service. We've been dating for 2 months. I wanted you to meet her. Elena greeted me with respect. No pretense. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Eleanor. Michael has told me so much about you. About everything you went through. About how you taught him to value himself again. I liked her immediately. There was honesty in her eyes. Humility. She knew the real version of Michael. The version that had fallen and was getting back up. And she accepted him that way. The months turned into a year. 1 year since that night of humiliation that changed everything. 1 year since I got my dignity back. 1 year since my son hit rock bottom and began to rebuild himself. Michael was still working hard. He had paid off almost half of his debts. He still lived in the apartment, paying rent on time. His relationship with Elena had become serious. She was good for him. She kept him centered. She supported him without letting him fall back into his old habits. I had flourished in my house. My garden was full of flowers that I grew myself. I had started teaching cooking classes to older women at the community center. I had made friends. Women my age with similar stories. Women who had also lost their identity taking care of others. Together, we were rediscovering ourselves. It was liberating. It was healing. It was exactly what I needed. One afternoon, Michael came to my house looking serious. Mom, I need to talk to you about something important. We sat in the garden. He took a deep breath before speaking. Elena and I are getting married. Nothing big. Nothing fancy. Just something simple at the courthouse. And I want to ask you something. Tell me, I replied, sipping my tea. I want you to be my witness. I want you to be there. And after, I want you to come live with us. He held up his hand before I could interrupt. But not like before. Never like before. We want to buy the apartment from you. We can't pay you the $200,000 it's worth. But we can give you $50,000 as a down payment and pay you the rest in installments over 10 years. I know it's a long time. I know it's not the best offer. But it's what we can do honestly. I sat in silence, processing. Why do you want to buy the apartment? Why not rent something cheaper? Because I want to show you that I can be responsible, that I can maintain something, that I can build like you and Dad built. And because that apartment has history, I learned the most important lessons of my life there. I hit rock bottom there. I started to change there. I never want to forget that. And Elena agrees. It was her idea. She says a home where important lessons were learned is a good place to start a family. And Mom, about you coming to live with us. It's not an obligation. It's not because we need you to cook or clean. It's because we want your company, your presence. But only if you want to. And if you decide to, you would have the master bedroom, the biggest one, with the private bath. Your space, your sanctuary. Never again a service room. Never again invisible. Tears began to roll down my cheeks. This was my son, the real one. The one who had been buried under years of bad decisions and toxic influences. He had come back, transformed, improved. I don't want to live with you, I said finally. I saw his face fall. I understand. You're right. After everything. It was too much to ask. I wasn't finished, I interrupted. I don't want to live with you because I finally found my own space. My own life. My own identity. But selling you the apartment, that I can do. And I don't need $50,000 for a down payment. Pay me $1,500 a month for 10 years. It's more than you pay in rent now. You can manage it. Michael did the math in his head. Yes, With my job and Elena's, we can. It will be tight, but we can. Then it's a deal. I'll talk to Hugo to prepare the papers. The apartment will be yours. Your first property. Earned the way your father and I earned ours. With work, with sacrifice, with dignity. Michael stood up and hugged me tight. Thank you, Mom, for everything. For not giving up on me. For teaching me, even when it hurt. For loving me, even when I didn't deserve it. I always loved you, son. But love doesn't mean allowing everything. Love is also letting people face their consequences. To learn, to grow. That's what I did. And look where you are now. The wedding was small and beautiful. Just close family and intimate friends. Elena looked radiant in a simple ivory-colored dress. Michael wore a sober suit he had bought at a thrift store. Nothing flashy, nothing fake. All real, all honest. I was his witness, as he asked. I signed the papers with pride. My son was marrying the right woman for the right reasons, not for appearances, not for convenience, for genuine love. At the small celebration afterward, Michael asked for quiet. I want to say something, he announced. I want to thank my mother. A year ago, I was destroyed. I had lost everything because of my bad decisions, my ego, my cowardice. My mother could have abandoned me. She could have told me I deserved it. And she would have been right. But she didn't. She gave me the chance to learn, to fall, to get up on my own. She taught me that true love doesn't rescue. True love lets you grow. Mom, everything I am now, everything I'm building, is thanks to you. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for being so strong. Thank you for teaching me what my father already knew. That you are the most extraordinary woman that will ever exist in my life, I cried. Everyone cried, because those words weren't a prepared speech. They were pure truth, coming from a transformed heart. 6 months later, Hugo called me. Mrs. Eleanor, I have news. Remember that last property? The land on the outskirts of the city. I remembered. It was the largest plot Thomas had bought. A construction company wants to buy it. They're offering $300,000. It's an excellent price. Do you want to sell? What would Thomas do? I asked. Hugo laughed. Thomas would sell, and he would use that money to help others, to build something meaningful. I sold the land. With that money and the monthly rent that continued to come in from other properties, I created a foundation. I called it Eleanor's House. It was a shelter for older women who had been abandoned or mistreated by their families. We offered them temporary housing, legal advice, psychological help, skill classes, everything so they could get their dignity back, so they could remember their value, so they could rebuild their lives. Michael and Elena volunteered. They helped with building repairs, with administrative management, with whatever was needed. Seeing my son serve others with humility filled me with pride. This was the real legacy, not the properties. Not the money, but the transformed lives, the lessons learned, the love that had finally found its proper expression. One afternoon, I was at Eleanor's house talking to a newly arrived woman. She was 70. Her family had kicked her out because they considered her a bother. Her story was so similar to mine that it hurt to hear it. I don't know how to get out of this, she said, crying. I don't know how to recover. I took her hands in mine. I didn't know either. A year ago, I was where you are now, humiliated, broken, invisible. But something changed. I changed. I decided I deserved more. I decided to get my dignity back. And you can too. It won't be easy. It won't be fast. But it's possible. I'm the proof. She looked at me with hopeful eyes. Do you really think I can? I don't just think it. I know it. Because if I could, anyone can. The strength was always inside you. You just need to remember it's there. That night, driving home, I thought about the entire journey. From that night of humiliation to this moment of purpose and peace. It hadn't been easy. It had hurt. It had required courage I didn't know I had. But it had been worth every tear, every difficult moment, every painful decision. I didn't save my son with money. I saved him by teaching him to save himself. I didn't get my life back with revenge. I got it back with dignity, with boundaries, with self-love. And now I was using that experience to help other women do the same. I arrived at my house, my home, my sanctuary. I walked in and was greeted by the smell of fresh flowers I had cut that morning. I sat on my sofa. I looked around. This life I had built, this peace I had found, this purpose that got me up every day. It had all started with a simple but powerful decision. The decision to value myself, to not accept less than I deserved, to remember who I really was. And that night, before sleeping, I spoke to Thomas as I did every night. We did it, my love. Our son finally understood. He finally became the man you always knew he could be. And I became the woman I was always meant to be. Free, strong, whole. Thank you for loving me so much that you planned for my freedom even after you were gone. Thank you for teaching me that a true legacy isn't measured in properties, but in dignity. I love you. I will always love you. I closed my eyes and slept in peace, complete, fulfilled, free.